And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
Tension on deck. Welcome. How are you? How you doing, Rob? Welcome.
Hey, Ron.
To New York's finest retired Unfiltered networks. We are the Executive Perspective. Retired Inspector Ron Leyson, and with me is my partner and co-host, retired Deputy Chief Rob LuKach. Today, we're going to be talking about the ongoing civil disorder within New York City and the response by the New York City Police Department, how they're handling the different protests and the different riots, demonstrations. I don't know that we've really reached another riot level yet, but a lot of this stemming from the summer of protests in 2020. I'd like to start today by acknowledging everybody and thanking everybody for the continued support for the Dim family, for Derek and his plight against cancer. Newsmax and News Nation both did a piece with Eric this past week, and Paul Manicone and his wife Chrissy, Paul Manicone from Just Right PD, continues to support after they started up the GoFundMe. Oh, and just a quick aside on the GoFundMe, there was a couple of fake GoFundMes that were put out. So remember, the only GoFundMe that we'd like you to contribute to is to the GoFundMe that is in our link and in Just Right PD's link, Finest Unfiltered link. No other fundraisers have been authorized. So please keep that in mind. And we do thank everybody for the generosity, the thoughts, the prayers, the continued support. Derek is now at home. They have an Airbnb that they set up home for so that he can have in-home hospice care. So he's resting comfortably, and he's a champion, and he's our hero. And with that, Paul Manicone put out a video with his wife to honor Derek, and we're going to take a look at that. Rob, you have anything before we play the video?
Nope.
1 year ago, 7-year-old Derek was diagnosed with DMG. It's an extremely rare brain cancer impacting just about 300 kids every year. The family trading in their dream backpacking tour through Asia for an RV right near the Los Angeles Children's Hospital. And treatments for Derek are very expensive. Eric saying the grueling tests have a heavy financial burden, forcing the Dims to cash out their 401ks to max out their credit cards, going broke, doing whatever it takes. Eric is not giving up the fight, and he is joining us now live. Eric, it's an honor to speak with you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me and telling the story. I appreciate it.
Can we start with how is Derek doing? What is his prognosis at this time?
Well, Derek is good-spirited. Right now, unfortunately, the prognosis, it's not curable at this time. So we're trying to keep him strong and stable in hopes that we could find a cure. So Derek's in good spirits. He's strong. He's eating well, but he's home resting, and he's right now receiving in-home hospice care as we speak.
I know you say Derek has shown just incredible courage, that he is your hero, and you're a former Marine and NYPD lieutenant. That takes bravery. Does watching your son battle cancer, does that give you a different frame of mind for what courage looks like?
Yes, well, it makes me stronger because any opportunity, if I'm tired, getting medicines, if I feel, how much more can we do this? How much more funds can we exhaust? There's no cost. It's priceless when it comes to your children, because the bravery that Derek has shown is exemplary. He's my hero. I look at him, look at that picture, strong boy training jiu-jitsu, and that's a spirit that he still holds inside. So that's a spirit that will never take away. That's a strong boy. He's a hero. I am so proud.
Ron, I think Derek is everybody's hero right now.
Absolutely. It's heartbreaking. We had to mute the sound just for copyright because there was a song behind it, a beautiful song that Paul had put up there. It's heartbreaking. This young, vibrant, now 8-year-old boy who's battling this, but we're not giving up. We're going to continue to hope and pray for a miracle. And like you said, Derek is definitely our hero. I also like to give a shout out to the Laguna Beach Police Department, who's been instrumental in escorting and supporting, continuing to support Derek and his family at this time. So thank you, everybody, once again, for your continued support, the Dim family, everybody that's out there. It means the world to him. It continues to give him and his family the strength to go on, because this is one of the most difficult times I can imagine.
Like Amazing Ann says, shout out, like you just said, to the Laguna Police Department, the California Highway Patrol, and I also believe that the fire department out there has also been helping out. So, our hearts go out to everybody that's extended their hand to Eric and his family. I have to give Eric and his family super credit. I mean, the strength that they are shown and are enduring for Derek. I mean, we're all behind Derek, and we're praying for a cure.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's the law enforcement community coming together with the Marine Corps, as Derek is a former Marine, the Marine Corps family, the first responder family, as you said, the first responder family, the fire department has come to his back, and everything else. So it's so important that we stick together as a law enforcement family and a first responder community. So it's very important. And that being said, we have had yet another loss in the law enforcement community here in the tri-state area, another tragic incident that occurred the other day.
Yeah, very sad in Newark, New Jersey. I know that some of the Newark ESU guys have trained. We're our ESU guys. I know we've responded over there a few times. So, we have definitely ties to Newark, New Jersey. Poor Detective Joseph Azacona, a 25-year-old officer at the time. He doesn't even get out of his vehicle, right? He's investigating gun sales. Just as he pulls up, this 14-year-old kid ambushes him, and he just shoots at the car and he and kills him. A terrible thing. Not to get into a rabbit hole, but the laws in New Jersey, this 14-year-old boy is not even going to be tried as an adult, right? Because of the law in New Jersey. So just a tragic thing. Our hearts go out to the Newark PD and especially to Joseph's family.
Yeah, it is true. Again, not to get down that rabbit hole, but the law in New Jersey also, I read that this 14-year-old, it will not stay on his record once he's sentenced, and if he does whatever sentence he does, his sentence is going to be, his record will be expunged. So when he's an adult and he's back out on the street, he's not going to show any kind of conviction. Let's also keep his partner, the detective's partner, in our prayers, as he was critically injured, but everything that I'm reading is that it looks like he's going to pull through. So thank God for that. But his partner was also critically injured, ambushed in the car with him. So it's heart-wrenching. And we also lost another member of the NYPD family, a civilian member of the family. For anybody that's ever been around One Police Plaza, worked in One Police Plaza, comes around through One Police Plaza, you've seen Peter Farley. Peter Farley was a staple. He was called the mayor of One Police Plaza, and he passed away after 51 years of service with the NYPD, his beloved 19th precinct, where he started out visiting and getting to know the police officers and the detectives, and was kind of adopted by the detective squad and the precinct. And it got him involved with One Police Plaza over 51 years, or about 54 years ago now, because Peter's been sick for the last few years. Commissioner Tisch tweeted out a video that was done a few years back when Peter was a member. So I'd like to roll that video just as a memorial for Peter.
Hey, Kurt. All right. Maybe I was born with that. Be friendly.
Peter is called the mayor of 1PP. I've known Peter since 1973. We started in the aided and accident section.
I can't believe he's been here for 43 years.
We both came in that year.
I think I would have been retired.
He practices courtesy, professionalism, and respect from 8:30 till 5 o'clock.
From my dad, you know, for draw, I say left. And I went and look to do party work. Then someone said, you want to draw? I say left. And I got high.
He's our internal logistics specialist. Everybody knows him.
Peter's a good man. But he's a Mets fan.
Peter knows people from the PC's office all the way down.
Going on the building?
He's like a rock star around here.
I know all the people on the wall over there. I know the department, I know PC.
The only one in this building I've seen that has an official mail cart with his name on it.
Peter's like a machine. He was the mail person of the unit.
Anybody who loves coming to your job every day for 43 years, that means he's a dedicated worker.
Peter used to mail out anywhere between 400 and 500 a day.
I think he mainly comes here to be around the people.
He has this passion for the police department. He loves the police officers. Every single one of them.
I like working with other to remember, and I like working with cops.
Peter loves everything about the police culture.
That's his fashion statement. His tie, his pin, his little medals.
I got PO, I got lieutenant, and chief department, and detective.
Oh, that tie. Peter's been wearing that tie since I've been here.
That's my favorite tie because it got the handcuff, it got the gun, everything pretty.
Being upgraded to the position of clerical associate level 3 is Peter Farley.
At the promotion ceremony, we were excited.
He had the loudest screams and applause from everybody.
That means PC, give me on this. He said, man, you got a lot of fun in the building.
Peter is NYPD.
He's definitely our angel here. Yes, he is.
No way I leaving that. No way. Go on every day. I ain't going nowhere.
So yeah, rest in peace, Peter Farley, an avid Met fan who actually got his dream to throw out a first pitch at one of the games. So
I agree with Mike Freed right there. Mike hits it on the head right there. Pete with his tie, his pens, his medals, right? Always had them on, everything, and he was always happy, man, and never in a bad mood. Always willing to say hello. You know, he was a true gentleman. You know.
Yeah, and
he'll be missed.
Yeah, and wearing the tie, the pins, the medals, everything else. But the most important thing that I remember him wearing was that big ass smile. So
yeah, all the time.
Yeah, I hope he's resting in peace, and his family has our thoughts and prayers. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. What's been going on throughout the city has been very difficult to watch, to be honest. There's different aspects that we'll talk about today. We're going to talk about the aspects of civil disobedience and civil disorder, like the video you see up here from around City Hall today. We'll also talk about incidences that are happening at locations such as the Tesla protest recently and the Barnyard College incident, and maybe touch on NYU from last year. But before we start getting into all of that and talking about all of that, what are your thoughts about what's going on?
Well, I tell you, when I was in SOD, SRG and also DCU, they all fell under our umbrella, right? And I had the highest respect for everybody in SRG and especially in DCU. And I thought they did a phenomenal job. I mean, during the riots, you know, the George Floyd riots, things were out of control. And these things that were done, I felt had to be done. I was on the streets with them. You know, I can remember a crazy story, right? Real quick. The crazy story. There's a guy in the apartment and he's looking down at us and he goes, "Why are you harassing them people? Why are you harassing the people?" In the meantime, they had just lit a dumpster on fire and it was literally going up the side of his building. but he's arguing with us like we're harassing these people. These people were burning his building down. So it was out of control. I mean, I totally feel that, you know, SRG and DCU, they did a great job during the riots, and I'm a little annoyed the way things are going now. When I look at these videos, my heart tightens up and says, I think guys are going to get hurt. I think it's really bad. But you know, that whole settlement, I think it was a stupid idea to do that, and I think it just takes away from the police department. Again, another way that they hold us back.
I'm going to agree with you very much that a lot of the people are getting hurt. Are going to continue to get hurt because of the way that things are being handled. There's policies in place that are bound by the settlement agreement that you're talking about. The settlement agreement comes from the many lawsuits that came out of the riots, the civil disorder, the protests of the summer of 2020 post George Floyd. You mentioned SRG, which is the strategic response group. For those who aren't that familiar with it, they're the Disorder Control Unit. Is we're gonna get into that after. The Disorder Control Unit is the ones who trained the NYPD in disorder control. And with that, we actually have a special guest today that we're going to bring up to the stage that both you and I know very, very closely. He worked for you, under you, as the prior commanding officer of the Disorder Control Unit. He's been a friend of mine for many, many years and a fellow classmate from my Police Management Institute class. And so I'm going to read you a quick bio, and then we're going to bring him up. It's Anthony Raganella. He's the founder and CEO of New York Blue Lines Consulting Group, a company which provides law enforcement training, consulting, and expert witness services nationwide. He's retired 25-year decorated New York City Police Department Deputy Inspector, where he spent 8 years as the commanding officer of the Disorder Control Unit, a citywide department unit primarily responsible for planning, assessing, and ensuring the department's training and readiness in public order, protest, and civil unrest operations, as well as major events and emergencies. He was also the co-chair on the Civil Disturbance Subcommittee for the 2015 papal visit to New York City, conducted international research for the National Institute of Justice in 2017 to develop standards for personal protective equipment and training within U.S. law enforcement civil disturbance units, which is our disorder control unit, right? Anthony is considered a subject matter expert on matters related to public order, protests, and civil unrest, and has been a leading advocate in the development of public order policing standards in the United States. Most recently, he has worked closely with the National Tactical Officers Association to develop and co-create the nation's first ever public order response and operations standard for policing. The rest is, normal bio stuff. I just wanted to think it was important to bring those things out just to let you know who we're bringing on. And we both know anybody can put anything in a bio, but we know that that Tony is the real deal and that he lives this, he eats it, he breathes it. So we welcome former retired Deputy Inspector Tony Raganella to the stage.
What's up, gentlemen?
Tony, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Loving the retired life. How are you guys?
Same
here.
I just want to start off by, there's two things that I want to say. First is you guys are doing a great job with this podcast. So thank you for all the work that you're doing and recognizing what's going on. It's a really, really great podcast. The second thing is I want to say hello to the both of you because as you guys know, and as people that are watching probably know, I didn't get along with too many executives in the police department, but you two guys were two guys that I actually liked and got along with. So thank you for having me on, and I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Definitely. We're looking forward to it too.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Rob, you want to?
So, Tone, I mean, having control of DCU and the training and stuff, You know as well as I do. I mean, you guys used to do those, sometimes at the Met games or whatever, you would do those scenario-driven things with all different agencies, which was good. Things that would come up. You know, Jose Vega, right? One of your top guys there was excellent all the time. Now, when you see these videos now, and you see the way, things are happening, what's your feel for that? You think that things are going the way they should, or do you think that maybe the things are a little bit out of control right now in the NYPD?
To be honest with you, I thought even while I was there with the department, things were not exactly the way that they should be. And my staff, I had an awesome staff in the Disorder Control Unit. I handpicked a lot of those guys. You mentioned Jose Vega. Jose was grandfathered in, luckily for me. He was one of my right-hand guys. But I had a great staff with DCU. We did a lot of amazing work. We did a lot of research and best practices and looked at a lot of different stuff. And then on my research trip over to Europe in 2017 with the National Institute of Justice, which I'm sure at some point in the podcast I'll get into more about that. But we saw a lot of things. That was an eye-opening experience because I came back realizing that we had a lot of ground to cover and we were honestly light years behind in crowd management and crowd control here in the United States. And there were things that I brought back that I definitely wanted to change in the NYPD because, you guys know the culture. We have a culture of this is the way it's always been done. Just keep doing what we're doing. It works and, no need to change anything. And everything is basically status quo. So, I may have ruffled a few feathers when I wanted to change things, and I was an advocate for changing things for the better and whatever. But I think overall, I'm not happy with what I'm seeing lately, and I think a lot of it comes down to what it's always come down to: leadership and training, right? And the implementation of policies. And I know Ron and I have had conversations in the past about, you could have the best policy on paper, and that's great. But if it's not implemented or executed correctly, it's a waste of time. And I see a lot of things that are written out. They look good on paper. And things are the way that they should be as far as what's written out in the policy. But when it comes time to actually execute it in real time, the command and control, the leadership, the training, it's not there. It's just not there. So there's a lot to be done. And the bottom line is, who does it affect? It's affecting the brave men and women of the NYPD that are out there on the lines every day, right? The frontline cops, the men and women, the sergeants that are out there trying to do the right thing. It affects them trying to do their job. It affects the citizens of the city of New York that want to go about their day-to-day activities. It affects the lawful and peaceful protesters that want to peacefully protest, and it affects everybody. And then financially, as we've seen with the lawsuits, it affects the department, and we just keep, unfortunately, paying out on these lawsuits unnecessarily, I might add. But that comes down back to the training and the leadership.
Yeah, I say it time and time again, Tony, and thanks for the kind words. I think that Rob and I's purpose for doing this executive perspective is to give the men and women out there, it's just everybody to hear. You don't get a chance to hear from the executives in a forum like this really at all. In New York City, definitely not. I think we're definitely the first. You see some people out on some news agencies giving their perspective on ongoing incidents, but to talk about topics and ongoing things that are going on in the city and hearing it from two people that spent 65 years in the NYPD and the vast majority of it as executives in different levels in different areas of the city, we try to get this information out, and what we're trying to do is to help the members that are out there, give them our perspective. A lot of times it'll be how they could do their job better, how they can do their job safer, whatever the case may be. Now, today we're going to talk a lot about what's going on. You brought it up. You brought up the policies and procedures. So let me jump into the protest settlement. So again, the protest settlement came out of the George Floyd riots of 2020, the multiple lawsuits that happened. So there's a lot of things. It's a long settlement that it started off. I believe De Blasio entered into it, and it was signed off under the Adams administration in 2023. But there's a lot to it. And again, I'm going to agree with you. We're going to disagree on some matters, and I know Rob, has his perspective on it, and we're going to get into all of it. We're going to break down some videos after, but I want to read some of what I feel is the more pertinent parts of the settlement agreement as it pertains to how we are allowed now under the court stipulation to police these different events. So in the settlement agreement, there's things called a red light and green light policy, right? So that reads that the NYPD has a policy called red light, green light, which shall reflect the following. Red light offenses are those that require the approval of someone at the rank of captain or above before any officer may make an authorized arrest. The following offenses shall be red light offenses: riot, incitement to riot, nonviolent obstructing of governmental administration, violation of emergency orders, disorderly conduct, trespassing, criminal mischief, third and fourth degree, New York State vehicle and traffic laws, unlawful assembly, and any offense not designated as a red light offense shall be considered a green light offense. So that's everything else. So before I even go any further, what they're basically saying here is that these offenses, if they're happening in front of you, the cops can't take police action. They can't do their job. They can't do their job. And I'm gonna get into something with you in a second, Tony. After I want to get through a little bit more of this. I don't want to just read the whole thing, but just to finish out the red light, green light. I'll skip. NYPD members of the service shall not conduct an arrest unless there is an individualized probable cause, as currently defined in NYPD policy, to believe that the person has committed a green light offense. Green light, again, is anything that I didn't read up above, which is basically go out there and just wreak havoc, and you're not going to get locked up without a captain saying, make the move, or an authorized red light offense by a captain or above. This means the NYPD member of the service may not arrest any person unless a member has sufficient objective facts based on the member's own personal knowledge or reliable and trustworthy information provided by other NYPD members or a third party to establish probable cause that the person engaged in an unlawful act. So that's the red light and green light. And we'll stop right there with the settlement agreement and talk about this for a little bit. Rob, hearing that part of the settlement agreement and what, again, has handcuffed the police in their ability to do their job, how do you take that first part of the settlement agreement?
It's ridiculous. How do you take away from the police officers their discretion and their ability to take action when it's happening in front of them? That's almost where they're going to say, I can't do anything. I need a supervisor approval or from a captain or whatever. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's micromanaging 101, right? That I can't do anything. It's really not good. And, the fact is that they should be able to make those summary arrests when need be. They should be able to protect themselves, It just really doesn't make any sense at all.
I agree with you 100%, and I think that there's always going to be, when you have something like this, there's going to be a captain on the scene forthwith, real quick. A captain's going to get there, and they're going to be there. But now, is that captain going to have the gumption? I'll say it in a nice politically correct way, right? Is he going to have the balls? He or she going to have the balls to go out there and start ordering these arrests? or are they in fear that they're going to escalate the situation? I personally believe that allowing those infractions to occur exacerbates the situation. It allows the crowd to feel empowered, and it continues and it snowballs. Tony, what's your take on this part of the agreement?
So just on this part of it, with the whole red light, green light thing, that started prior to my retirement. So this is not new to the settlement agreement. This was kind of started prior to 2020 at some of the protests, and I was never really a fan of it for the reasons that you and Rob highlighted already. You're taking the discretion and the autonomy away from field supervisors and cops that are on scene to be able to effect arrests for violations, misdemeanors, whatever it is, in that list of red light offenses. The other thing is, a lot of, on the other side, the pundits will tell you that that arrests, when arrests are being effective or being affected, it causes to increase tensions in the crowd and it exacerbates things. That's not always necessarily the case, and the dynamics of protests that may devolve into civil disobedience or civil unrest, there's no two incidents that are alike. It's not, everything has to be tailored to the dynamics of that particular event. And I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been at the scenes of things where we effected arrests and I said that didn't go well, that made things worse. And then I've been at the scene of events where we effected a couple of arrests and it actually de-escalated tensions because people saw what we were doing, we set the tone, and that kind of backed people off. So that experience and knowledge of being at these events and knowing when to effect arrests and when not is part of that training that has to take place. But to pigeonhole everybody with this red light, green light, and you're going to have cops and field supervisors standing there saying, I can't do anything about people running onto the FDR Drive and blocking traffic because I need a captain here. And it's going to cause delays in making tactical decisions that could effectively thwart anything from getting worse. And you're taking that away from their discretion to be able to do that. So I think in the long run, you're going to see that this is going to cause more problems than it is going to be beneficial.
I just hope it doesn't turn out like the Squid Games if you're going to play red light, green light. That could be very devastating. So, but I think that
I'm familiar with that. Sorry.
But I think the fact that I just don't see the organization anymore. Like these, it just seems like everybody's, if something happens in front of them, and even if they get the captain to say, okay, do it, right? It just seems that they're jumping in. There's no, remember we used to, there'd be a line, right? And then there would be a arrest team behind it. And then when you're going to pick somebody out in the crowd that you're going to arrest because the agitator or did some criminal miss or assaulted somebody, that team would go in, right? Grab that person, pull them back behind the line would close, and everybody's protected. Now they're grabbing people and they're pulling them, and then people are pulling back. It's like a tug of war over a person. It's just, even red light, green light, whatever, even whatever tiers we'll get into, but it just seems like there's total disorganization because it's not a cohesive unit anymore. It's just like ad hoc type of, people put together to address disorder.
And Rob, that is an absolute direct reflection on lack of training, right? We're not training for it. Like, when we were doing the DTU thing, you mentioned earlier about how we would do the mobilization exercises and we would have multi-agencies. I was a huge fan of doing those as much as we could, reality-based training, where I would have the mounted unit come out and we would have actors throwing stuff at us, and we would have aviation do flyovers to recreate or to simulate the noise of, you know, riotous situations. And you invoke that stress inoculation with the cops, and you're getting something out of it, because the cops understand what it's like to be in those environments. But what's going on now, like you said, it's a hodgepodge and ad hoc things going on where we're just pulling at people and dragging them out, and the optics of it and the end result is just it's not good. It's not good all the way around.
And it's not just like, I remember, Tony, your guys used to come out on every platoon and do disorder drills also with the patrol, with guys on patrol. They would call a mobilization to a mobilization point, a borough-wide mobilization, and do training with patrol officers who would be the ones to initially respond to an incident. So now these initial responders to a pop-up event, which happens every day, number one, they don't have the proper training. Yes, after the summer of 2020, everybody in the department was retrained in disorder control again. They were brought down to the new police academy. They were all taught in the lines, the wedges, and everything else. I have not seen one line, one wedge since I've been watching everything, and everything is on social media every single day. It's not just what they decide to put on the mainstream media. Every day you see these videos from all of these different organizations, these groups, and you see nothing but disorder. That's why we kind of in a pun named this episode NYPD in Disorder Control.
So let me tell you just how bad it was when I took over the Disorder Control Unit in 2010, like right before Occupy Wall Street started. One of the first things that I did when I got to the unit, besides taking inventory of what equipment we had and all that good stuff, one of the things that I wanted to know from the staff that I had was, what are the requirements for disorder control training or crowd management training in the NYPD? And I wanted to know, like, are we under any mandates federally or statewide to do a certain amount of training? And I was horrified at what I found out. We actually wrote to the Department of Justice and said, are there any federal mandates or requirements on police departments doing crowd management or crowd control training? The answer was, we have nothing. There are no requirements on the federal level. So then we went to the Department of Criminal Justice Services for New York State, and we said, what's the requirements for posts for police academies in New York when they do their police academies? How much time in a police academy has to be dedicated to the recruits for crowd control and crowd management training? And the answer was, as far as New York State was concerned back then, it was, you have to dedicate at least 2 hours of training. And I was like, wait, what? 2 hours? I'm like, you're kidding me. And so I immediately went to my bosses and I said, this is not, like, there's no way we're going to be able to do this. Like, there has to be a lot more training for the recruits, because Ron, you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's all fine and dandy to have the patrol borough task forces, what we had, and then have SRG, right? That's great when they eventually get there and show up. But initially, you're going to have regular patrol cops that show up to an unplanned event. They're the first ones that are going to be there. They have to have some semblance of training to know when to make arrests, how to effect arrest, how to carry people properly that are engaged in civil disobedience, so you're not dragging them out and injuring them and causing more lawsuits and the optics of it and all that. So I said, we have to get to the recruits before they graduate the academy, and we have to do more than 2 hours. And at the time, when I took over, the disorder control training was being done by gym instructors in the police academy. And I'm like, what expertise do the gym instructors have about crowd management and crowd control? I'm like, we have to get in there. And luckily, I wanted to go in there I could never get enough training. Like, I wanted to train and train and train and train. We had to compromise, and I wanted to do a full week of training with the recruits before they graduated. That was never going to happen because of the time constraints, whatever. We ended up getting them for a full day of training, and it was beneficial because we did some stress inoculation stuff we put them in different stations and showed them what a mass arrest looks like, what encirclement looks like, you know, how to use the batons, how to use the shields and all that stuff. And it worked out well. And then from my understanding, after I left DCU, I think that kind of got toned back to like 4 hours of training. And now I don't even know what they do, but you're 100% correct. It's the whole department has to be trained on crowd management and crowd control to a certain extent. But you need to have, you know, all police departments, especially the larger ones, need to have specialization, and you need to have a tiered approach to who specializes in different things, right? So basic cops that come out of the academy should have some semblance of what crowd control and crowd management looks like, because as you said, they're going to be the first ones there. But then you ramp up to the task forces or the SRG that are going to have the more expertise in that will come to the planned events or eventually to the unplanned events to handle things. So a lot of it comes back to the training.
Tony, during the George Floyd riots, SRG was staged out on Randall's Island, but they would get an influx of patrol guys, right? Because now, because of the magnitude of the riots, you know, citywide or whatever, they would bring everybody in, and then everybody that was there wasn't necessarily trained, like you said, up to the speed that SRG was or DCU. And now they're being sent out to go to a particular location. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. They are the first boots on the ground in their own precincts. But now here they're even being pulled for citywide operations. So it's like there's totally disorganization between everybody. They're just going out there. And, you know, some cops, they didn't want to, no hands on. They didn't want to do anything because I felt for them, because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to handle it, you know, and it was just chaos, everybody running around. I mean, I agree with family shopping. I think he or she brings up a great point. Hey, we got TPF, right? We could bring them back. Anamone, right? He started the whole, you know, disorder control book. So, you know, let's bring him back. And what really annoys me is when they took Mounted out of the picture, right? All of a sudden, now the horses can't be part of it. And the horses were a great tool, right? So you have a 10-foot cop. That's what they call Mounted guy, 10-foot cop. He can see everything out there, sees anything. If somebody's doing something bad, they can tell the arrest team, hey, it's the guy with the red hat, blah, blah, blah. That's it. And then they can make the arrest. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. The first thing any department does when they cut back or they lose personnel is they cut back on training. And that's the worst thing they can do, because then they put everybody that's not trained in harm's way. And I completely see this happening.
And I'm gonna go one step further, and let's Woon or One. I'm not sorry if I don't know how to WUN. The new cops I have no clue how to do disorder control. They do not know what's expected of them. Again, further failure of recent executives and training. I'll go one step further. We haven't touched on it yet, and I know that you're going to agree with me. The executives that are supposed to be leading the charge, the captains that are supposed to be making these decisions to make the red light arrest call, are not properly trained. They're not properly trained. They watch a video in tactics. They watch it. He's chomping at the bit. He's chomping at the bit.
I know what he's going to say too. I know.
Listen, wait. Just the executives, and I speak from personal experience. I was in patrol for the vast majority of my career and the vast majority of my executive career, where, except when I was a candidate assessment, I was on patrol either as an executive, an impact captain, an executive officer, a commanding officer of units. I was the commanding officer of the Queens North Task Force, and I can tell you that I did not feel trained enough. I took it upon myself that I had my guys do training in the gymnasium at the castle on Northern Boulevard to do this stuff and to refresh my memory of it, because I haven't had it since I think I was a sergeant maybe. And then I'm a precinct commander. Then I worked at the borough. When I was a borough commander, again, I was a borough commander during these riots. I wasn't properly prepared, properly trained to go out and lead the men and women at these events and give proper direction. I say it, I admit it. Listen, I was good at a lot of things, but I'm also good at admitting what I don't know. And I tell you, I was assigned to details before I got hurt to go out when we were aware of potential protests or uprisings or whatever, because of intelligence that we were gathering from the vast networks of protesters that were organizing and getting together. And I would go there, and I would hope to have somebody from SRG or somebody around that could, listen, you're attached to my hip. You're going to give me guidance. I don't care if it was a sergeant or lieutenant. You're going to give me the guidance and tell me. And is that the right way to do it? Listen, you're always, so I feel the way to success, and not just a successful career, but a successful outcome of a situation, is to surround yourself with the people with the proper knowledge and experience to guide you. And as an executive, you make the call. But you know what? I want the people to give me the advice to make the right call. And I honestly, I didn't feel prepared to be out there. And, you know, and that's coming from somebody who is a big believer in training. The training wasn't even there for me to take. It wasn't even there for me to take. Yeah, I had to click on the video after 2020. We all had to watch a video in order to be in compliance, right? But did it go any further than that? I mean, Rob, you were an SOD. As the executive officer of SOD, which Disorder Control, SRG, both fell under, what training were your executives given?
None. They weren't. They were the same, you know. And I didn't have it either. I was lucky enough to have guys like Tony and the guys in SRG, and I would watch. Right, I would watch and learn, because there was no formal. I mean, I had the BS training, right, and then I think but that didn't help at all, you know. I mean, my other problem though is that I see executives in the middle, like making the arrests. You know, I mean,
we'll get into that.
I mean, I think that's where Tony was going to go with this. I said, this is not the job of an executive to be going in there and grabbing people. All right, and that's what you, as an executive, that's what you do. You tell the cops, hey, all right, we're going to move in. You guys arrest that guy, arrest that guy. You don't need to be putting hands on. That's ridiculous. You look at Barnyard, right, and where the college, and you have protesters, Palestinian protesters, and there's Jewish people walking by getting harassed, and they don't do anything, right? That's okay. It's like, you know, they're actually harassing people. Are we talking about like hate crimes? You know, are they threatening them? I mean, there's things that's going on. But when you have white shirts like making the arrest, that's bizarro world. Like that means they're literally not doing what they're supposed to be doing. How can anybody effectively supervise when you have three captains? I don't know what the rank of the white shirt is.
There's a deputy inspector, a captain, and a white shirt.
Okay, so yeah, and what are the cops doing? Look at the cops in the back on the left. What are they doing? They're watching this. They're watching the bosses do this.
So Rob,
this is ridiculous.
So Rob, let me. You guys, you brought up a lot of. Yeah, you got me going now. You got me going. So. This I could talk for hours on this, but I'll try and get right to the points. First, Rob, exactly what you said. Like when I teach around the country and I speak to police chiefs all over, and they're amazed when I tell them what the term white shirt frenzy means in the NYPD, because they're like, what is? I put it up on the board, and I'm like, anybody heard of white shirt frenzy? And they're like, what is that? And when I explain it to them, they're like, what? So, Rob, that would be the equivalent, like what the analogy that I always use is, would you as a deputy chief, like the executive officer of the Special Operations Division, how many times have you told the pilot of a helicopter, let me fly it?
Yeah.
Never happened?
No way. And I told Ron on the last podcast, I was never the lead bunker in ESU either, right?
Right? You have people that are trained to do it and specialize. Your job as an executive, white shirt, is to see the big picture and to stand back and let the people that are trained trust them to do the job that they're trained to do. And you need to see the big picture. if you are on top of somebody, putting your hands on them, nobody's watching the big picture. And during 2020, I'm not going to mention names, but we had a chief of department at the time that was out there, and like, my big thing was, where's the command and control? Like, who, you need to have high level people seeing the big picture, and we completely did not have that at the time, right? And to go all the way back to Occupy Wall Street. So when we were doing those mobilization acts, it's funny because it was literally a few weeks prior to what happened with Occupy Wall Street. I was called in to Police Commissioner Ray Kelly's office to give him a briefing. This was like weeks before Occupy Wall Street happened. And absolutely love Commissioner Kelly, all the things that he did. I was a huge fan of the way that he ran the police department. And when he brought me in there, he basically said, tell me everything that your unit does, and then tell me what it is that you need. Tell me what you want. Do you need more people? Do you need more equipment? It was almost as if he had a crystal ball and saw that Occupy Wall Street was coming, because we were like, wow. And then when Occupy Wall Street started, all of a sudden I was getting phone calls left and right from everybody. What do you need? Like, the floodgates opened with the budget and buying the orange mesh and buying more flex cuffs and less lethal munitions and all the stuff that we always wanted for the Disorder Control Unit but could never get our hands on. All of a sudden we got the knee-jerk reaction because now something was going on. But one thing that was good that came out of it was we trained within a year. We went out to the field and did mobilization exercises with not only the task forces at the time, but patrol level personnel. We trained over 10,000 cops in 1 year, with my staff going out and doing the mobilization exercises and showing up to the counterterrorism deployments and pulling them out for an hour and doing training. That's just not, I don't know that that's being done anymore. I don't see it being done. I don't know if it is, but those were the things that we were allowed to do, and we were given the discretion to be able to do that. And they trusted DCU and the experts to be able to go out and do that, right? And now, as it's evolved throughout the years after Ferguson and the Baltimore riots and Eric Garner and all the things that we saw, we've seen a different level of threat from the disruptors and the extremists that hijack peaceful protests. Yet our response and our tactics and our equipment that we haven't risen to that level yet to meet the new threats that are evolving. And we're still at that stage where we're kind of hampered by the equipment that we have, or don't have, I should say, because we have to gear our tactics to the equipment that we don't necessarily have that we should have. And because of that, we have to kind of navigate what our tactics are going to be, and they're not always the right tactics. And it comes again back to the leadership and the training is a huge detriment to us. And then, Ron, to go with what you were saying, with the leadership being trained, I will tell you 1,000%, the problem in the NYPD is not the cops, it's not the sergeants, it's not the lieutenants. It is there's a disconnect with the leadership for the very reasons that you said. You have executive level people out there that are now all of a sudden thrust into a position of, you're the incident commander. Oh, okay, I'm the incident commander. What do I do? Like, I've never been trained to handle this, right? And you think about, in this country, right, our First Amendment constitutional right to freedom of speech, peaceful assembly, all the rights that were given in the Constitution under the First Amendment, how special they are and how revered those constitutional rights are. And now you're going to send an executive out to police and protect those rights for peaceful protesters with no training whatsoever. That's the analogy of, I have a heart issue and I'm going to go, I have to have heart surgery done, so I'm going to go to a podiatrist who's a foot doctor, right? And I'm going to let him operate on my heart. Like, what? It doesn't make sense. When I went on that research trip in 2017 over to the UK with National Institute of Justice, I went with 4 other subject matter experts from the country, around the country, from different parts of the country. We went over there. one of the things that I immediately saw and said, this is the way it's supposed to be. Over in the UK, the London Metropolitan Police Services, right? They're pretty much on par in size and organization with what the NYPD is, right? Millions of people that they police. They have tens of thousands of police officers, constables. One of the things that they do, they are so far advanced over what we do, and we really need to look at how the Europeans are doing riot control and policing of protests, because there's a lot to be learned from them, because they've been doing it a lot longer than us, and they've seen a lot more disruptions than what we're starting to see now. They've been dealing with it for decades. But one of the things that I immediately recognized was, do you know that an incident commander for public order in the UK, they have to be trained and certified by the Command College of Policing in the UK to be able to be assigned as an incident commander? They can't just go out. It's recurring training. They have to be certified, and it expires. And you have to go for training for the different levels of interaction that you may have, whether it's a tactical level, a strategic level, or an operational level. Why don't we have that here? So that's the big push of what I'm currently doing now in my retirement, is advocating for these national standards in the United States to make police departments better. We have over 18,000 police departments in the United States with no national standard on how we respond and police protests in the United States. It's no wonder that we're in the position that we're in. And the NYPD is just emblematic on a macro scale of what the issues are. And we have to get better at that. But at the leadership level, huge disconnect. And Rob knows that myself and my staff, we always tried to advocate and nudge our bosses to, we gotta educate the executives. Like, we want to do training for the executives. And the pushback was always, oh, they're prepared for ComStat. They don't have time for that. We can't do that. But then all of a sudden, when they show up to an incident and now they're thrust into the role of an incident commander, they're looking over their shoulder at me or one of my staff and saying, what do we do? How do we handle this? Well, you should have known that before, and that's
you look at Sims, right? With an incident commander, operational sectional chief, logistics, all of those things. What training did we get? We literally went and listened to Pulaski talk for 8 hours, and half of us were just wondering when the hell meal was coming, and it was out. That was done. And then they expected you to, on a job, to establish all these different types of, where's the incident command post? Who's the incident commander? And it was all disarray, and nobody did. The fire department does a great job with it. They really do. They know incident command. They set up their board. They're very, very proficient at it. And I say to this, the old saying, training, right? So if you're not training and everybody doesn't know what's going on, it falls apart. So if it's a baseball team, you don't fire every player, right? So we talk about the cops, the lieutenants, the sergeant. They're doing the good job. You fire the coach when the team doesn't play right. So it's time to fire the coach. We need a new coach here. I think what if 5-0 had mentioned something earlier was a pretty good question about Chief Monahan taking a knee. I love Chief Monahan. I thought he was one of the most intelligent guys on the job. I was there. I walked out of that park when he took that knee. To me, that was the worst embarrassing moment I've ever done on the job. And I was behind him. And we all looked at each other and said, what is going on? Why? There was absolutely no reason. He literally said, this is how we're going to show the world what New York does. To me, it was the worst thing that ever could have been done. I spoke about it before, and Ron and I had kidded about it. My wife literally texted me, and she says, if you take a knee, do not come home. She says, I don't want to see you. I don't even want you to walk through the door. And I said, listen, when that happened, I walked away, and I think everybody in the department lost respect for the chief of department. And that was a terrible thing, because he was very good. He was a cop's cop. He knew what he was doing, but he let one event dictate the rest of his career. It wiped his career out. It literally showed that he catered to these rioters. We were literally standing there, and somebody called me over and said, hey, I want to talk to you. White shirt, come over here. So I go over and I said, what's up? and they started throwing water bottles. And I said, I'm not even talking to you. Until you stop those people from throwing water bottles at me while I'm talking to you, I'm not even having a conversation. And let alone ever take a knee or give them that. And really, what happened? It did nothing for the cause. It didn't help the NYPD. It didn't help the protesters. It was a complete embarrassment.
So let me just interject there on that topic, Ron, before you jump in, because I feel exactly the same as Rob. When I saw that on TV, I literally almost vomited in my mouth when I saw that, and I said that is it's disgusting. That was disgusting. Now, I mean, look at the pictures. Like, listen, I understand we want to at every turn we should be trying to de-escalate tensions. I get it, but me personally, there's only 2 times in my life, 2 times that I take a knee. One is when I propose to my wife. And the second time is when I'm in church and I kneel to my God. That's it. I am not kneeling with people that are engaged in violent and tumultuous behavior as a means of de-escalation. I could find a lot of other ways to de-escalate tensions without taking a knee. You completely ruined the morale of the department and everything that you stood for. And then the next day or days thereafter, now all of a sudden you're going to shift gears automatically, and now you're going to enforce curfews and start enforcement. And like, you can't have it both ways. You got to set the tone and stick with it, and that just wasn't done there.
And I agree with you 100%, Rob. I got the same. My wife said the same exact thing. She said, if I ever see you on TV taking a knee, the only person we take a knee for is God. And just like Tony just said, my wife told me the exact same thing. She goes, because they see us on TV all the time as executives and at different events and whatnot. If I ever see you on your knee, that was that. And again, I'm also someone who was a supporter of Chief Monahan. Chief Monahan, I got to know when he was the executive officer of Trowboro Queens North, and I was the 110 precinct CO. And we got to know each other, and he supported my career from that point forward, and gave me guidance in certain ways. But and like Tony said, after that incident, he was kind of almost persona non grata, and it changed the way that not only people viewed. Go back to the picture of him on his knee. Look at the cops in the background. Normally, when you see a boss do something, the cops are going to follow, right? If you see them doing something, they're going to follow. If you look at the picture, the cops are looking at them like, what the hell are you doing? Not one cop got down on their knee with him.
Hey, Ron, think about this. Imagine, Rob, think about this also. Imagine seeing Louis Anamone, Tommy Graham, or Joe Esposito on their knees. What? No, ever, never, ever, never. It's just not happening.
No.
Disgusting.
And Joe Esposito was huge with the community. Would have no problem walking into that crowd. We talk about leadership. We talked about on one of the podcasts who was a question came up, who were the best bosses you ever worked with or worked for, and we both agreed that Espo was one of the top, and that Espo would have no problem walking in and leading from the front. There's a difference. Though. Espo wouldn't on a daily basis be grabbing everybody. He would be directing. And again, we talked about the leadership. We look at all these videos daily the videos on mainstream media, on social media platforms everywhere. You see the white shirt frenzy, as you call it. I like that. I've never heard that before, honestly, but I like it, and probably will use it again, Steele, and may not give you credit for it. But the white shirt frenzy, because that also, it's not just and again, it is leadership, but leadership is not just from the white shirt level. You see constantly these videos where the sergeants and lieutenants are the ones that are getting involved. Every time I see a dog pile at one of these First Amendment activities, right, I see supervisors are the ones doing the enforcement action, not directing the cops to do it. Not directing the cops to do it. And if the white shirt is jumping on, then their lieutenant's going to jump on and the sergeant's going to jump on. And now who's giving the direction to the cops? The cops are kind of on their own. And we have seen throughout the years, and I believe, listen, there was a lot of positives that came out of Operation Impact. But I believe the autonomy of policing was lost, where cops stopped being able to make on-the-fly decisions due to team-led enforcement. I think that that's one of the biggest losses from Operation Impact was that cops weren't out there working independently, handling their jobs, learning from senior officers, and making decisions and taking actions on their own, not waiting for the boss to get there and tell them what to do. I think we've lost that in the police department, and I see that every day. I see that every day in these videos where it's the supervisors. It's the supervisors. I mean, we touched the hot button when we talked about supervision and even the executives. And talking about buttons, like Terry Murnane is saying, let's please. We're a little bit over an hour into it. Let's hit the like. Let's hit the subscribe button. Let's get this podcast to grow a little bit. Help us out with the likes and the subscribes. Put the notifications on so that you get it on the Finest Unfiltered network. You'll get our podcast notifications. You'll get the notifications for the Finest Unfiltered at 0805, as well as the Sal Greco show, who comes on a couple times a week. He's doing live shows now at 12:05. He'll be on tomorrow with a hot topic, and then the guys will be back on Friday. But so hit the like and subscribe button. But let's get into a little bit more. And we've touched on some of it, but one of the things that came out of the stipulation is this tier system, the 4-tier system. And Tony and I have talked about it. Rob and I have talked about it, and we're not all in agreement with the way the tier system is. Again, my personal opinion and my perspective from my time is that I believe that the NYPD has a vast amount of great policies and procedures that are on the books. And we'll say on the books because they're not being executed properly. And that's the problem. Things are great when they're written down, but there has to be follow through like any other plan, like a simple crime plan in a command. If I put the plan out there and it's not executed, we're not going to have success. We're not going to have success. So here you have the settlement agreement, and parts of it I do agree with. Parts of it I'm strongly opposed to. The tier system, parts of it I'm going to agree to. Parts of it I'm not going to agree to. So let's just talk about a little. Tier 1, right? That applies, should apply to all FAAs. What's a FAA, right? First Amendment activity, right? The NYPD shall only deploy police officers in this tier as described below. The officers selected from the Community Affairs Bureau shall act pursuant to the mission of the Community Affairs Bureau, right? Which is building community trust. So they're supposed to be the ones, the first line. They're supposed to be the first line at a First Amendment activity. Again, the problem being here partially, before I even go any further, is are they going to be the first to respond? Unless it's a scheduled event, which you see less and less and less of. Scheduled events. They're not going to be the first ones there. The first ones there, again, are going to be the responding patrol officers from the sector cars or the foot posts in the proximity, depending on where it is. These officers focus on communicating with the protesters, understanding the aims of the protest organizers, communicating with the protesters about how officers can facilitate those aims. How can we help you? And the circumstances in which they cannot. Explaining to the protesters any police action that's anticipated, imminent, or undertaken. In the extent identifiable, officers should have this dialogue with the protest leaders. If not identifiable, officers attempt outreach to multiple protesters among the crowd, and they are to wear their community affairs, powder blues, And that's what the beginning of this is, which I really don't have a problem with, because it's what we do. It's, well, to a point. Wait, to a point. Hear me out, Rob. To a point, because if it's a scheduled event, this is what we're going to do, right? The first event that you schedule, whether it's anything, whether it's a protest or even just an event, it could be a parade, it could be any event. The first thing that you're going to do is your community affairs are going to reach out to the event organizers, and we're going to basically say, what is your intention? What can we do to help facilitate that within the boundaries of civil order, and not the least amount of disruption to the general public?
So Ron, in over in the UK, the term, what we're calling community affairs officers in the UK, they're called police liaison teams, and they wear a different color, so they're not recognized as the patrol cops that are going to take enforcement action or police. They're out there to establish a relationship and to facilitate a relationship up front as a liaison between the police department and the protesters that are there for peaceful protest, right? And I have no problem with that. That's the way it should be. Again, like you said, very easy to do when it's a pre-planned event. But when it's not a pre-planned event, community affairs officers are not going to be the first ones on the scene. You're going to be waiting for them to get there. And at that point, they may be completely ineffective. They may not work. Like the police liaison teams, like all the things that we talk about and that I'm teaching nationwide, they're all tools in a toolbox to be used at the right appropriate time, depending on the layered approach and proportionate to what's going on in front of us, right? So you're not going to bring out police liaison teams or community affairs officers when things are being lit on fire, right? That's just not there's a time and a place for each tool, right? And that's where the training and the incident command structure has to come into place, so that the policing tone and the overall objectives set by the incident commander are relayed down to the field commanders in the field. Otherwise, it's just not going to work out correctly.
I mean, who does it? Well, I want to give a shout out to Eddie Lutz earlier, because he put a comment out about throwing up. What Monahan basically did is he threw a white flag at that day when he kneeled. So Eddie had put that up. So you might as well just wave a white flag. That was it. We waved it, and that was it. It was all over for us. To the community, to this tier 1, where the community affairs officers, listen. What good are they doing, really? They're wearing a nice powdered blue jacket or shirt, and they're walking around. Some of the videos I see, they're making arrests. So I mean, where's the liaison there? If I was going to do this, I think it should be somebody from an executive rank, should be marrying up with who's ever the lead in that protest or the parade, so that they can command the rest of the members and deploy people appropriately. All they're doing is holding somebody's hand. They're not making any decisions. They're just, and they're going to try to quell a problem. No, a problem's going to occur in front of them. And then I ask, what training did the community affair officers get in riot control, disorder control? What do they have? No. I'm going to tell you, they got the same as every other cop. And now you're putting this poor guy wearing a community affairs jacket, has to hold this protester's hand. Who's leading who there? Because they're just going to go where they want. And who's going to say, hey, you can't go down that road, or you can't go this? I think you need an executive there that's going to say, hey, that's where the executive should be. Put one there, and then put one with the personnel. I don't need executives rolling on the ground and tussling with people. I mean, that's where you want the executives.
So Rob, to your point, I agree to a certain extent and disagree to a certain extent. I think in theory, police liaison teams or community affairs officers serve a great purpose to relieve, I should say, tensions and de-escalate upfront to establish relationships. Again, you're not going to use them when there's a full-blown riot, right? But upfront, that's good. But you brought up the important point, which is, what training did I have to do that? Over in the UK, police liaison teams go through weeks and weeks of training to be able to do the crowd control stuff and know how to mingle inside of a crowd and interact with the crowd, know when to step back when enforcement units are going to come in and when that tone changes. They're aware of all of that. We're not giving any of that ammunition or training to our community affairs officers. We're just saying, go out to this protest and community affair. They don't know what that means. They just go out and do the thing that they normally do. And then you see these examples like you're seeing on the video where community affairs officers are now putting their hands on people and dragging them out.
That's a community affairs sergeant.
That's a sergeant, even worse. So now now you want to tell the peaceful protesters that your community affairs officers are there to help you and facilitate your protest or your peaceful protest when they're looking to the side and seeing them dragging out people and arresting them. So there's a conflict there. It's a disconnect. It's no good.
And then now the sergeant dragged him out, and there's the cop standing there like, what do you want me to do with him now? The sergeant didn't even give direction at that point. So now you have these other cops that are moving in. So to Rob's point, again, I think it falls back to what we're all saying is it's a lack of training. Rob, all right, you disagree with the policy. I think myself and Tony agree with the policy, but it's not being executed properly. It's not being executed properly. These community affairs officers in a situation like this are supposed to go in there and de-escalate. And if they don't, then it moves up to a different tier. But where I'm gonna separate from agreeing with this tier 1 system is it continues where in FAA, the First Amendment activity, temporary blocks vehicular or pedestrian traffic or otherwise obstructs public streets and sidewalks, the NYPD shall, whenever possible, accommodate the demonstrators.
Listen. To me, that's a no-starter. Like, we're not facilitating people blocking the FDR Drive or the West Side Highway. Like, no, that's not acceptable. Now, personally, I don't have a problem with, I'm a huge fan of Martin Luther King and what he stood for and what he brought about in the civil rights era, right? Civil disobedience, peaceful protest. I can deal with that. Like, I can train cops. We can slow the pace down. You want to sit in the road, we're going to pick you up and arrest you. It's not violent, whatever. But for you to run on a highway and stop traffic, and I've been at the scene of incidents where that's happened, and you could see down the road an ambulance trying to get to a hospital or just everyday people trying to get home from work. What you think is your right to do that, and you think that you're doing that under peaceful assembly, and you have a right to do that, you're infringing on other people's free movement and their right to peacefully move about in the public, right? And you have to weigh all these different things, but that doesn't give you. This is where we get conflated with terms and definitions, also, which is a whole nother subject, where you'll see the media in front of a news camera giving commentary, and behind them is broken windows and something on fire, and the news reporter will say, "I'm here at the scene of this protest." You're not a protest guy. You're at a riot, know, and they use those terms interchangeably, and they have completely different meanings.
All right. Now that you brought that up, I was actually gonna bring this up a little bit later. You wrote an article. It's an excellent article. It's long, but it was very detailed, and it was an excellent article that you wrote on your LinkedIn page, where you wrote that the NYPD wasn't properly prepared or trained to handle the riots in the summer of 2020, only crowd control. You also bring up that people and media, which is what you just did again, use the terms demonstration, protest, and riots interchangeably. So without, in your views and your expertise and your experience, expand on that a little bit, because we're going long.
So listen, here's the thing. If I was to ask a room of people what's in the First Amendment, right? What rights do you have in the First Amendment, right? And even politicians, And elected officials will say they think the same thing. They're like, it gives you the right to protest. No, it doesn't. The First Amendment does not give you a right to protest and assemble. It gives you the right to peaceably assemble. That word peaceably is a huge piece. You can't have one without the other. You can't just go and assemble any way you want, whenever you want. People think that they have a right to do that. No, the Constitution says that you could do it peaceably. And once it's not peaceable anymore, we have a right to place restrictions on that and take enforcement action. And that's where there's a disconnect. And the media portrays it as, well, they're just protesting. They're just assembling. They have a right to do that. No, they don't. And that's where things, need to be distinguished amongst what the differences are. Whereas you have a peaceful protest, you have a rally or a march, you have civil disobedience, where now we're doing nonviolent sit-ins, right? Whether it's in front of a building and not allowing ingress or egress, or sitting in the roadway and blocking vehicular traffic. And then you ramp up to, civil unrest, where we have, long-term property damage, assaults, fires going on, looting, which amounts to a statutorily defined incident of riot. And every state has different statutes on what qualifies as rioting, whether it's 5 or more people, 10 or more people. But they're all different terms that need to be distinguished, and we can't use them interchangeably. And the media and the elected officials, to fit their narrative and their agenda, they like to use those terms interchangeably. And by doing that, when you see something, broken windows and a building on fire, and you have elected officials or the media saying, I'm at a protest, you're giving a bad signal to everybody, saying, oh, that's a protest? I have a right to protest under the Constitution. I'm going to go down there and light stuff on fire and break windows also. You're sending a bad message by getting those terms mixed up.
I think, so hop along. Gizzo Deech, I think he said. He asked where's mounted.
You got to use your Italian accent. It's
Deech. He asked where's mounted. They're not used anymore. When I was in SOD, they told mounted, we don't want you anymore, because the protesters has arguments with them, and the horses are they a little bit uncontrollable, right? When they start moving, but they would move a crowd. They would push the crowd. They were able to control, but they're not even used anymore, right? So I mean they're completely out. They're just, all they are there is for public relations, and let me take a picture with your horse. Let me pet the horse. It's ridiculous. And I just want to give a shout out to Stephen S., because he apparently told his chief, that he shouldn't bend the knee. So I think he did a good thing for the LAPD, right? He looked at something, saw the repercussions of it, and was able to probably help that chief. Don't do that. It gives the wrong interpretation of it completely. So, but I also think that a lot of these demonstrations, whether it's in Brooklyn, right, they're walking through neighborhoods, or whether it's up at Barnard, the college, they start to cross the line of riot, unlawful assembly. They start to harass. They start to say things. They threaten, because if you look at, like, I think it's riot 2 or whatever, or even inciting a riot is just an imminent threat. So when you talk about that, I've never seen anybody charged with riot. As long as you were there, I mean, everything was always discon, maybe resisting, very rarely assault, and they were given a summons or DAT and released, right? They were taken down to 1 PP, and they were processed, and then they were released from there. So really, there's no deterrent. Right? I mean, you look at this poor guy. He's in one of the cyber trucks. He has nothing to do with the protest, right? Nothing to do with anything. But because he's driving a cyber truck, which years ago would have been a great thing, now they're ready to curse him out and harass him. I mean, I think that one of the other problems is we're not charging people, and I don't care if the DA prosecutes or not, but we should be arresting these people for what they're doing. You know, whether they're harassing somebody because of their religious beliefs, or whether they're threatening somebody in a car. I mean, these are things that the NYPD doesn't do either. They just allow the BS go discount resisting to get it out of their hair.
Rob, here's the legal conundrum that the NYPD has faced in the past, and they did during the 2020 riots and protests and civil unrest that went on, was when the district attorney tells you that they're not going to prosecute certain offenses, and now you go out and make an arrest for it, knowing that the DA is not going to support that charge, you put yourself at a liability and a lawsuit. Now, the flip side to that is, I don't care. I need to get this person off the set, and I need to de-escalate this and get them away from what they're doing. We'll deal with the lawsuit later. That's another way of looking at it. But this is, you have so many facets that go into public order work with the police, the elected officials, the politicians, the district attorney, all have to be on the same page to make this work flawlessly and effortlessly and to be effective. And you just don't have that in New York City at all.
You absolutely don't have that. And this once again comes back also to the hesitancy of some police officers that are out there, or just members of the service in general that are out there, because they know, like you said, I'm going to make this collar. It's not going to get prosecuted. The DAs have come out and absolutely said, right, what they say in 2020, we are not prosecuting anybody that was arrested for trespass, disorderly conduct, or riot. They were, unless there was violence involved, unless they were charged with an assault. And then they probably didn't charge him for that anyway, or dropped it down.
And what did that do when the public heard that? It emboldened them to say,
that's a problem. That's why I acquiesce to that. Then I say lock them up. I don't care. I don't work for the DA, right? I work for the NYPD, and if a violation of the penal law is done in front of me, I'm going to take the arrest. I'll make the summary arrest, and I'll deal whatever. Do you want to you want to DP the case later on? I don't decline to prosecute. That's your prerogative. You're the DA. But you know what?
And that's the attitude that we came up with on the job. That's the attitude that we came up with on the job. Hey, listen, I did my job. But to the cops' defenses now, when the DAs are not prosecuting and outright saying they're not going to prosecute, you have these red light, green light policies in effect now that say that they're not even allowed to move in and make an arrest when they personally observe a violation, a misdemeanor in the penal law, but they're not allowed to make an arrest. And when they do make an arrest, the arrest gets thrown out. Now they're getting sued. They're getting sued for false arrest. There are people embedded in these protest groups, because they're well organized, that are filing CCRBs on every one of the cops. Look at Eric Dim and what happened to him in the summer of 2020. All the CCRBs and lawsuits that were dropped on him from the riots was one of the reasons that led to his leaving the police department, because of the multiple sets of charges that he wound up with. And this is another facet that we didn't have to deal with as police officers, that the police officers of today are dealing with, and dealing with real time.
And add on top of everything that you just said, Ron, add on top of that the rank and file don't even feel supported by their own supervisors and the administration of the police department. So the morale is at an, I mean, every time I say the NYPD morale is at an all-time low, and I think it can't get any worse, and I think that things in the city can't get worse, something surprises me and gets worse. So, like, the cops that are out there are saying, the DA doesn't want to prosecute this, and if I do something on my own, if they have to question whether my own supervisors are going to support me and protect me in doing the right thing, we have major problems.
Maybe that's why in those videos the cops are smart as hell, because they're standing back, they're not taking the actions. It's the chiefs that are jumping in, the captains, the inspectors that are making the arrest, because the cops like, you're out of your mind, guy. It's not going anywhere, and I don't need this BS, right? So maybe they are. They're the smart ones. Maybe leadership should look at the personnel that works for them and say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna take what they say and what they're doing as gospel, not because they open up a box at 1PP and the gold light came out and they got all the wisdom and knowledge that they'll ever need. You know, take it from the men, the boots, the men and women on the ground that know what's going on. So I don't know. I think the whole thing's convoluted. There's a lot of flaws in it, and this law, like we're talking about, all these, the tiers and everything else. It's just bureaucracy to stop them from doing what they want to do. They've literally empowered the protesters to do whatever they want. They have, like Ron said, they have attorneys in their groups. They're shouting out phone numbers, who to call when they get arrested. So I mean, they've literally drummed down as much as they can the NYPD to react to any of this, and they've been totally emboldened and empowered that they can harass people on the street. They can march through different neighborhoods and just take over. It's to me it is disorder, but it's disorder by the NYPD.
Listen, here's the bottom line. This is the bottom line to the whole thing, and this is what I talk about around the country. The bottom line is this: as a police department, we will absolutely support and facilitate your First Amendment protected right to peaceably assemble and protest. The minute that it becomes unlawful and it's not peaceably anymore, we need to set the tone and take action. And that's the bottom line. And you're not seeing that happen here in the NYPD or in New York City or around the country for that matter. The police have relegated themselves to taking a back seat and allowing the escalation of the disorder to take place to the point where, all right, now it's a full-blown riot. I guess now we have to do something. But why'd you let it get to that point in the first place, right? So that's part of the issue also.
And then they're disorganized then, because now even when that riot happens, they're not even formed up in groups to know how to respond to that.
Listen, I'm blown away by the whole thing, and there's a lot of good comments that are coming. And there's three people I want to basically acknowledge in the comments right now. One is your old sergeant Jose Vega, phenomenal trainer, phenomenal lecturer. Was out there with us in the street doing the physical training with us, besides coming into classroom sessions, and I remember him working with us hand in hand when I was in task force. He's saying the rank and file has also lost confidence in their training. Yep. What training? They lost confidence in the training of the 2 hours they got in the police academy. It's not feasible. And again, once you have to actuate and go out there and get involved in something, you resort to your training, right? It's muscle memory. You resort to your training. But if you don't have the training, what are you doing? Now I'm waiting for the supervisor to give me direction. But you know what? The supervisor doesn't have the training.
Here's the problem.
Up the level. Hold 1 second, Tony, 1 second. And then I think another big problem again, and TC's made quite a few comments, is the job's at fault for giving credence to BSCCRBs. And again, I'm for it. I am for what you said, Tony. I'm trying to look for the third one. What you said, that 100%, I'm in agreement. Our job is law enforcement. We are one cog in the wheel of the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system has a flat tire, but we are one cog in the wheel, and it's our job to go out, to maintain peace, to maintain order, to all of Tony's points. It's our job to also enforce and to allow people to peaceably protest and celebrate their First Amendment rights. That is our job when we protect and serve, when they're doing it peaceably. That is one of our jobs. But when they break the law, right, then it comes up to another part of what it was in Tony's article, is the citizens' constitutional rights. versus, at a First Amendment activity versus the NYPD's duty to protect life and property, where we have to go in and we have to take police action. I agree with you, Rob. Make the collar. That's our job. TC says it. Make the call. If they 343 it, it's on them. I agree with you. Unfortunately, we do our job. We observe. We take police action. The DA doesn't follow through. The civil suit comes. The CCRB comes. The cops' CPI, which is their personnel index, their confidential file, gets peppered up, messes up their future career. The job is not backing them. As a matter of fact, Commissioner Tisch just stated at a city council hearing that she's going to amp up more discipline on the officers. Again, they're chronic offenders who would not turn on their body, one camera, not a one-off, people that do it either intentionally or consistently. But there was also a statement that was said that they are going to no longer get rid of the cases that the CCRB presents to them that have less than 60 days to the statute of limitations, that they're going to fast track them. So if you're fast tracking a case that CCRB took over a year to investigate, which we know for a lot of it is not a fair investigation, that you're not getting your due process, because they've openly said that they don't take into consideration all the facts and circumstances and the big picture. They take into consideration what the civilian feels, because they're the Civilian Complaint Review Board, right? So then they push it forward. Now you have them where they're going to actually look to process on a fast track these cases with less than 60 days. How much due process are these officers and members of the service honestly getting? So they're up against so much. I agree. Do your job. Your job is to make an arrest. But it's like it weighs heavy on my heart to stand there. And towards the end of my career, I've said this a couple of times. I used to go down and I used to do, Eric Dim talks about the training he did with his officers all the time. Big on training, big on Constitution, big on legal bureau bulletins. They had to be armed with the knowledge to go out there and properly do their job, as well as tactically. And I used to go down and sit with them and talk with them and thank them for the great work that they did. And towards the end, I'm like, I don't know how you guys are still doing it. I'm the borough commander saying to guys going out there, taking guns off the street, saying, I don't know how you're doing it. So I don't know how these guys are going out and girls are going out every day to these protests, to these civil disobedience, to the civil disorder, which is really what is the concerning part, is the civil disorder. And they're going out and they're doing their job. And then they're not being backed by the police department. They're not being backed by the politicians. They're not being backed by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Not that they should be backed by the Civilian Complaint Review Board, but they should not be over prosecuted by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. And so Tony's word, the conundrum, right? Where do you find the balance with doing your job without the fear of losing your livelihood, without the fear of, like Eric Dim had to do, go into his own pocket on a civil lawsuit because he wasn't indemnified by the city because he had a founded CCRB, so they didn't indemnify him. So when the city gave him a $3,000 settlement, Eric had to go into his pocket. It's ludicrous what's going on. The third thing, just a real quick shout out to a fellow classmate, 9336, Kevin Prentice. I see you out there, brother. Thanks for paying attention. Thanks for giving us the support. Now
I was going to say with TC, he said it's up to higher ups to meet with the DA so we can work in lock and step instead of every agency for itself. Absolutely. Maybe that's the key. If we don't get the city council, if we don't get the DA on board, if we don't get the mayor behind us, then yeah, maybe nobody should do anything, right? We're just going to let these riots go on. I think John asked a great question. He goes, what do you guys think about the NYPD saying they will not go on college campuses without permission of the university? I think that, to me, that's ludicrous also, because that just festers then, right? They put up, if you look at the college, the Barnyard College, right? They made up an encampment. They had, all these tents up, and, then they start harassing students on there. I mean, I know you're going to say, I know what you're going to say, that, and they do, they have the right to refuse because it's their property or whatever, but at what cost? When you see them, I just watched a video the other day. They went into a classroom where there was a Palestinian protesters with a bunch of Jewish students, and they literally harassed them and held up the class for 3 or 4 minutes or so, maybe even longer, harassing them, filming them, threatening them, and the colleges just allow this. I mean, at a certain point, I know they'll say that we can't go on there, but I think we should. I think we should.
Tony, because I'm gonna toss it to you, and because we talked about this, but I just want to give my opinion. My opinion, I agree with you 100%. I agree that it's ridiculous. Again, you're coming up with the NYPD's duty to protect life and property, and these college campuses are private institutions, and we have to be guided by them. But to what extent? Because at what point is there the threat of violence, the threat of damage to property, and so forth? So I agree that we are handcuffed because it's private institutions. I'm going to toss this to Tony because I know he's actually he's certified as an expert witness in this particular matter, and is involved in a specific case very close to this. That he can't discuss specifics about that, but let's hear from Tony about the college campus situation, because that's a separate entity of itself.
So yeah, correct, Ron. So when you're dealing with college campuses, it's a whole nother world, and there's a lot of nuances from a legal standpoint that go in. Not only legal but political nuances that go into how we police and deal with college campuses, right? So the first question that we have to ask is the institution public or private? Two different realms. When you're dealing with a public institution, we can walk onto the campus and do what we have to do. When it's a private campus and they're doing an encampment, the legal bureau has to. Those are all things that have to be worked out, and those things have to be straightened out beforehand, right? So this when October 7th happened with...
Well, let me ask you a question, Tone. What if there's a crime happening on the campus and somebody asked it just before, somebody calls 911 and says, okay.
No, that's different. I'm talking specifically right now about an encampment, the encampments that took place, right?
Something like NYU last year.
Yeah. So when you had October 7th happen with the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and then Columbia University started with the inventors of these, the recent college protests and encampments, and you had Columbia University putting out in their area for the students, putting up tents and sleeping overnight and all that stuff was going on, right? The problem is Columbia is a private institution, and for things like that, unless we're invited onto the campus by them and they want to be the complainants to take care of that, we're not just walking on without a 911 call or whatever. That's a separate issue, but for just an encampment, it's not a public space that we can just go in and police, right? So what happened with Columbia University was, I guess when the president of Columbia University realized that this was starting to go bad and it wasn't a good optic anymore, they wanted us to come in and clear up the encampment. And kudos to the legal bureau with the NYPD, because they were smart enough to go back at Columbia University, it's my understanding, and said to them, we'll do that, but you're going to request it in writing to us that you want us to do it. And that was smart of them. Otherwise, that's a little political chess game, because then Columbia University would have had the plausible deniability to say, oh, that was the NYPD when it backfired. Oh, that was the NYPD that came in and did it. No. We have the actual letter that you wrote us to come in and do it. So we're covered by that.
You know what else they could do? They could call in a BS bomb threat.
Exactly. Which you saw with Barnard, right? And so these are the things that, like, college campuses is a whole nother, because you have the whole political aspect of the college campuses, right? And the administration of the college campus, and how are they working with the police departments? Are they on the same page? Do they want us to come in? Do they not want us to come in? Then you add to that, do the college campuses have their own police department? Do they have their own security? Or the security that they have peace officers that can make arrests? Or are we making the arrests? Or are they taking the arrests and we're just there to help them out? And on top of all of that, now you've seen recently the federal government is getting involved in this stuff, right? This is why America is such a great country, right? Because we have all these checks and balances. At the end of the day, with everything that's going on right now, you're going to see this is all, at the end of the day, I watch the news all the time about, well, this guy that ICE just removed, that has his green card and all that stuff. The federal government was involved, and because he's a supporter of Hamas, that this is all going to end up being worked out where? In the courts, right? And that's our system of checks and balances. So the federal government can do what they want. The local police agencies do what they want. The district attorney, the college campuses. At the end of the day, we're a litigious society, and it's all going to be worked out in the courts eventually. And the attorneys and the expert witnesses like me end up making the money. So
there you go. Let's hope.
But there's a lot of nuances that go on with the college campuses. It's not the same as being out in the street or in a public space. And there's a lot of.
But you see on the campuses, right? They went out onto the streets and then literally were harassing people walking on the sidewalks too. And there's no enforcement. They were literally grabbing people and letting them go. Like they were telling them to get out of there. No, that person's harassing somebody, and that's it. It doesn't matter, black, white, Hispanic. If you're harassing somebody and you're causing public alarm to them or alarm to them, that's a summary arrest in my opinion. But yeah, I understand what you're saying totally with the college campuses. It was always a bone of contention about when you're coming on and whether or not some of them, the security guards would stop you when you'd be like, you're stopping me. I'm not going to, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, as Ron would say. I don't want to get into that. But yeah, it's problematic, but
listen, like when you have an incident of a 911 call or a bomb threat, that's a completely different issue than you're having a peaceful encampment and you just want us to clean it up for you. That's completely different than we have a bomb threat that needs to be investigated. Like those are two totally different things. So
right.
Whoever phoned in that bomb threat,
yeah.
I think it was probably a campus administrator so that they don't have to take the heat for emptying out the building.
Very well could be. Very well could be.
Yeah. So Stephen S. asked earlier, he asked about the batons. We were all right. I had a regular baton. Then you used PR-24s, right? And then there's a man, and also the shields, right? I don't see that anymore now. I don't know if it was I don't think it was outlawed, but I don't see them using the shields, and especially since they put SRG on the outside now, right? So community affairs isn't going to be carrying a shield, and some of those cops there. But when they make a line, I thought the best thing to do when you make a line is to have a shield up, right? And have your baton ready, right? Because this way, if somebody spits at you, and I wouldn't have that person talking in my face like you were a clown in the drive-through. I wouldn't happen. So Tony, what's your thought on the batons and the non-use of the shields that we used to? I mean, obviously you purchased some of those shields, right? So
Yep. So again, it comes down to another tool in the toolbox at the right time at the right place, right? So at a peaceful protest where you have, you know, a woman's rights march with, you know, 70 and 80-year-old women, we're not coming out with batons and shields in our hand, right? That the optics of it and the proportionate response is just.
But would you? I remember you guys used to have a disorder control truck with all that equipment, though, close, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's right there, ready to go, which is part of what this tiered response is talking about with the settlement agreement. That, you know, at a peaceful protest, I don't need to have, and I don't recommend having SRG out at a peaceful protest with batons and shields out.
Right.
The optics of it is not necessary. You're unnecessarily increasing tensions at a peaceful protest. But that's not to say that they shouldn't be right around the corner at the ready to go the moment that something goes off the rails, right? And so what, to Ron's point with this tiered response, like I don't necessarily, which is where I may disagree with you guys, in reading the different tiers of the settlement agreement, I don't necessarily have a problem with the contents of the tiers because it's all stuff that we should be doing anyway. The problem is, and I mentioned this to you guys earlier, was that the whole red light, green light thing, that I have a problem with, because you're taking away discretion and authority, you know, and instant tactical decisions that need to be made at the field level. But with the contents of, you know, peaceful protests and the optics and ramping it up to a proportionate level, I'm in favor of that. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. The problem is going to come in with what Ron started this whole podcast off with that's great that we have these policies, but the actual implementation of it and how it's going to play out, that's going to remain to be seen. And I don't know how that's all going to work out. The other important thing to recognize with this settlement agreement is it's not a forever thing. There's different phases to it. And it's my understanding that it's only going to last for 4 years before we're not under the court settlement anymore, and then we can revise and change it however we want. And even as it stands now, under certain circumstances, there can be modifications made to it as long as the plaintiffs and everybody agrees to it.
Do you think the executives were trained in this tier thing?
I would bet my house that they weren't.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a whole nother, like, so here's the latest problem, right? So now you have this settlement agreement, right? Now you have to come up with new training for especially for the executives, because they're the ones that are going to be tasked with being the incident commanders, being out there, the after action reports that have to be done. And I'm a huge proponent of, I love after action reports, and it always frustrated me when I was on the job, and Rob, not to mention any names, but it was one time where when I first got to the Disorder Control Unit, at the scene of one of our major incidents, I had my staff write an after action report, and I kind of sent it up the chain, and it was sent back to me with red writing on it that says, "We don't do this." And I'm like, what do you mean we don't do this? Like, what are you talking? And, you know, NYPD, unfortunately, which I don't recommend, because it's not like other police departments, we have a culture of, and this is going way back when, before I even came on the job, the culture was, if it ain't in writing, it didn't happen. And we have plausible deniability, right? But that it's just, we're so far beyond that now that, listen, we're looking to improve ourselves and do better for the citizens, for the cops that work for us. It's just, we have to be transparent. And we have to show what we did, and we're always looking to improve ourselves. And you need to do those after actions to make things better. So that part of the settlement, I'm a huge proponent of. I think after action reports are a good thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, when you look at ESU, right? After every job, they stand behind the large rescue truck and they'll talk about the job. You know, it's like a quick recap of everything. what you did right, what you did wrong, and then the bosses are there, right? The U boss, ESU boss 4, or ESU boss 5 are there, and the captain or myself were there, and we would listen to the cops and say what they did wrong, what they did right, anything that I did wrong, maybe some other chief was able to slip by me and I was able to grab him by the collar and say, you don't need to be on this floor. So it was a stand up open thing. And I totally agree. If you look through, FEMA and the task forces and the deployments, there's always after actions, because how do you better yourself? The only way you better yourself is if you critique yourself and look at the things that you've done wrong and look at the things you've done right and make corrections. That's the bottom line.
But by the way, have you guys have you read the after action report that the NYPD put out about the 2020 George Floyd riots?
There were 2 of them, right?
That was that the one you?
The one published by the NYPD. You haven't read it. You know why?
It was never done.
Because it wasn't done. And it's not. And it was never published. There was nothing there. I have some knowledge that maybe something was put together, but it was never. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I think I might know the chief that was kind of overseeing that.
So what happens? You mean to tell me the largest police department in the country experiences widespread civil disturbance and riots for days and days and days, and they don't do an after action report on and critique themselves and improve themselves on what went right and what went wrong? But the mayor has to step in and task the Corporation Council and DOI to do after action reports. Like something's wrong with that picture.
Yeah.
All right. We went quite long. We didn't even get into finishing the different tiers and whatnot. But I think this is a very important topic. I think that you see it every day, and the officers that are out there every day, and it's not getting easier. I mean, just a quick, Marlon asked a question earlier. Marlon's part of the Finest Unfiltered family. He asked a question earlier. Tony, real briefly, how do you feel about the city council pushing for the disbandment of SRG?
1000% against it. Which we could say for another day, but Rob knows that before Bratton came back the second time and did his whole re-engineering thing, I proposed the whole SRG concept in 2013, and it ended up not going anywhere for political reasons and all the nonsense that goes on with the bureaucracy and in the leadership in the department. But you absolutely, with the size department that we have, you absolutely have to have public order specialists. And I'll end it with this. This is the exact reason why in my retirement now I'm out consulting and training and advocating for national standards, because not that any of us were around back in the 50s and 60s involved in policing, but if you think about what the world of special weapons and tactics looked like for police agencies in the 50s and 60s compared to what it looks like now, SWAT has become so specialized and credible at what they do because of the training and specialization that they have, right? That's where we need to go with public order training, because this is not going away anytime soon. The protests, the civil unrest, the civil disobedience, it's going to be here for a long time to come. We have to get out in front of this, and we have to specialize and professionalize the public order work that we do. So SRG is an absolute necessity in a police department our size and a city our size. It all comes down to the leadership, and the training has to be there, and it's just not there.
So here's the other thing. They say eliminate SRG. Okay, they don't even know what SRG does, right? So when there's a missing, SRG responds. When there's a shooting, SRG responds. When there's a level 1 mobilization, SRG responds. When there's an active shooter, they respond. They put on heavy vests and they carry M4s. Okay, they are a force multiplier for every aspect of what I just spoke about. So to say get rid of SRG, that's asinine. Okay, you want to put SRG to the side during riots? All right, I get it. Do the tiers, do whatever you got to do. But the idea of disbanding SRG is ridiculous because they don't understand what they do. So
But Rob,
they should really learn what they do and then decide.
again, it's one of these political hypes where they want to spout out and give you, oh, disband this, don't do that, no longer do this, no longer do that, but they never give you an answer of what to do. They always want to tell us what not to do, but they don't want to give any guidance, and they can't give any guidance because they don't, right? They don't have the knowledge, right? As Eric says all the time, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Dunning-Kruger effect is where the people that have the least amount of knowledge want to talk about it the most, right? They have no idea what they're talking about, but yet they want to spout this. They want to tell us to disband SRG, do this, do that. Okay, so then what do you want to do in response? How are we to respond? How are we to respond? Use your other assets.
Yeah, well, they don't have an answer for that question. They just want to spout off and say disband SRG. It's like TC said, it sounds scary. We don't want that. Well, that's what they were talking about that when we had the task forces also. So no matter what you name it, and no matter what you create, they're going to say, oh, it's oppressive and offensive. We don't want that. Like the disorder control units. My understanding now that it's not called disorder control unit anymore. They had to change the name to be the crowd management unit. So I think it's now CMU, right? Because that sounds like, stop. If they're doing the same, you could change the names all you want. They're just got to fit their political agenda. They're just going to keep putting it down and saying it shouldn't exist. But you absolutely have to have public order units that are dedicated and specialized to policing protests and doing riot control.
No, just like, I mean, they talk about this in the city council hearing, right, with the PC about getting rid of the gang database, and they don't even know what it does and what harm. They don't even know what harm it causes. They can't tell you what harm it causes, but they want to disband it. So I mean, it's exactly the same thing with SRG or any, like you just said, DCU, disorder control unit. Oh, let's disband it. But then what do we fill it with? And then we have a problem because you're not doing this. It's ridiculous.
All right, guys, we're just over 2 hours into this. We want to thank everybody, all our followers, for the great comments today. It was a great discussion, I think, that we got a lot out there. We could keep going. We could absolutely keep going and talking about this and the different things. But I think that we got our main points across from the executive perspective to allow those out there that are watching, the rank and file, to understand a little bit more about what's going on, the inner workings of how it happens and what happens. And they also see a lot, heard a lot from Tony. And, I hope they know that there are executives that are fighting to better this department, to make this department a better department, to make this department a safer department, to make the job better for the men and women who are out there so that they can better serve the people of the city of New York. And I want to thank Rob for coming on this journey with me, because I think that's what we're trying to do also with the different topics that we're covering and going along with this Executive Perspective podcast. I want to give a quick special shout out to Marlon from the Finest Unfiltered family, Marlon B. Yeah. That's our new logo that Marlon put together up on the top of the podcast there. We love it. So we appreciate you, Marlon. Thank you very much for that. And Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we're going to have you back for, Juju just joined us. Hey, Juju. All right. I want to thank you again, Tony, for coming on. We're going to have you back to do a recap of your entire career. Today was, you were a subject matter expert. It was so appreciated. The expertise, the professionalism that you brought to the podcast. We didn't get into any funny stories. We'll get into plenty of those, I'm sure, when we do the interview, because we want to start doing interviews of executives and memorializing their careers. So before we close it out, and we'll give you the final thought, Tony, just so hold on. Rob.
Yeah, just thanks everybody, in the chat. A lot of great information. Thanks, Marlon. You did a great job on that the new insignia. I mean, thanks, Sal. Sal was in there also. So everybody from the Unfiltered family, thank you. All our friends and listeners, thank you so much for being with us. Tony, great seeing you again. Great information. I wish you the best, and hopefully we'll bring you back. We'll have you give you your career, and maybe next time after that we can bring you and Jose Vega on together, and we can have a real disorder control.
Well, we could just talk about training in general. We could talk about training in general, which is the topic that is endless. It's endless. It's not just about disorder control. It's about everything. Every topic that we have talked about so far, I think, centered around a lack of training and a lot of inadequate supervision and leadership. And it's sad to say, as a leader, as executives, all of us, what we tried to do when we were on the job, and I think I think personally, I can speak for the three of us and say that we accomplished, from knowing both of you, that we did accomplish that. Not to pat myself, but we accomplished. My goal was always to leave a place better than I found it when I got there, to improve it and improve the working conditions, improve the community, whatever the case may be. That was always my goal. I think I was successful. I hope I was successful. I know that you guys in wherever we were, and even when I was in candidate assessment, it was different. It wasn't a community, but it was other aspects. So every aspect of our job, we tried to better it, and I think that we did, and that's what we're trying to do to continue here on the show. I hope we could, to those that are out there. I know there's a lot of other executives that are watching the show. Please reach out to us. Reach out to us. We'd love to bring you on. If you have subject matter expert, or if you just want to memorialize your career, if you're retired, we understand active duty isn't going to come on. We understand that. So, but we want to give Tony the last word, and then we'll say goodbye with one more thing I have to say.
Yeah. So I'll be quick. Rob and Ron, obviously, thank you for having me on today. And please continue the great work that you're doing with this podcast, because it's really it's taken off, and it's a really good perspective that a lot of the rank and file and members don't normally get to see and hear. So it's important that they hear what really goes on behind the scenes and what the thoughts are of the executives. So continue on with that. That's great. And in relation to the topic that we talked about today, I will say to the men and women of the New York City Police Department, I will always support you. I always have supported you. You're the courageous people that are actually out there on the front lines. Don't ever let, I know it's easier said than done, but don't let the leadership and the politics of the oath that you swore, get you down. Like, you're out there serving the public, and the law-abiding people absolutely appreciate what you do, and you are that thin blue line between peace and anarchy. So when you're out there doing public order work, you're doing God's work, and I know it's difficult, but just hang in there, and hopefully things will get better. And then finally, I'll just say, Ron and Rob, make sure you have me back on for my personal interview, because it will be one of the funniest podcasts you ever have, because you both know that I have stories that are just
we can't tell them all.
That they'll never believe, unless you hear it come out of my mouth. You'll never believe the stories are true. So, thank you.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it, and we appreciate everybody. We want to remember to keep Eric and his family in your thoughts and prayers. If you can donate, the link is in our description for the show, for the real GoFundMe. Whatever you can afford. Don't look at the number of what was collected, because it's inconsequential to the bills that they have and the finances that they've gone through, their entire savings, their life savings, their retirement savings. Now they had to set up shop in a brick and mortar, house, in order to give comfort in in-house hospice for Derek. As we said in the beginning, Derek is our hero. He's everybody's hero. So God bless them. I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank everybody for coming along in the comments. Remind everybody that tomorrow, 12:05, the Sal Greco Show on the Finest Unfiltered Network. He's going to have the Quisha Epps' attorney on to talk about that ongoing saga. And then on Friday, we'll have Marlon, John, and Sal. Eric's going to be off taking care of family matters with the Friday roundtable 0805 on the Finest Unfiltered Network. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a great week. We'll be back next Wednesday, 5:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be safe.
Good night, everyone.